In this lecture, I want to talk about logging. Now, logging is super critical when it comes to running an application in production. We need a way to understand what's happening on our server because we can't rely on things like print statements. The reason we can't rely on print statements is that we need to persist any information that we capture, and using the Python standard library logging module, this provides us with different ways we can do that by using things like files for persistence through a file handler, or providing us with ways to stream logs to external data storage. So logs are a key part of what's known as observability, along with things like metrics and distributed tracing, which are beyond the scope of this course. So let's have a look at our code. In the config module, you'll notice that we have logging settings, where we specify the logging level for our application. And here, as per the Python standard library documentation, these are the logging levels that we typically work with, and these operate as a hierarchy. So if I specify in my config that I'm going to be logging at the level of info, then this means that any log at the info level or above is something that's going to be captured. If, on the other hand, it was something below info, for example a debug, that's not going to be captured. Let me give you an example of what this looks like here. When we start our application, so in the main py file, where we find this _name equals _main, this syntax basically means that it's when we're invoking the file directly, so running Python main, then we're going to trigger this logger warning, and this means that we're going to be logging at the warning level. And you'll recall from our hierarchy that warning is above info, and therefore we expect to see this log message in our console. And if we look at when we start up the server, you can see that this warning is present. Running in development mode, do not run like this in production. Okay, so if we were to change the level here and switch from warning to debug, we know that in our config we've specified the logging level as info. So now if I restart the server, you'll notice that upon starting we did not see this warning. That's because we've changed it to a debug. If, on the other hand, in my config I specified a logging level of debug, important for this to be capital by the way, and then restart my server, now we're seeing the debug logs as well. You can see some of these logs that we didn't see before because they were at the debug level. And we use these logs at certain key points in our application. So for example, in our predict endpoint, we capture the inputs before a prediction is made. We capture with a warning if there are any errors, and finally we log the prediction results. So if you're expecting to be audited, then logs are the sort of bare minimum that you would want, and you'd want to be looking into persisting them so that you're able to access them X number of months into the future. And it's very important that you keep these kinds of records if you're in a regulated industry. Even aside from that, if you just want to be able to make sense when your API, your model isn't performing in the way that you expect, then having logs is one of the most basic windows into what's going on in your application. Just be aware of how much and how frequently you're logging, because you can fill up a lot of disk space very quickly if you log too verbosely. Okay, so this is how we've been using the logs so far. Now we need to look at the actual setup that we do, and this all takes place in the setup app logging function. Before we look at that, logging in Python is notoriously awkward, and so I've made use of this library called Loguru, which simplifies some of the configuration for logging, and that's why at different points in the application you're going to see from Loguru import logger. If you're used to just using the standard Python logger, this one might confuse you, so that's what it's there for. Okay, let's head over to our setup app logging. And this is a relatively tricky bit of code. What we're doing is we're taking the Uvicorn loggers, and in the next lecture we're going to be looking at Uvicorn, but suffice it to say that our web server has some default loggers, and we're intercepting anything that these loggers are capturing. So we have this intercept handler, and this is all something that Loguru recommends doing, is intercept standard logging messages with Loguru. So things that would usually go to the standard out, we're going to make sure that Loguru captures them, and that means that we're going to have a simplified handler which we can configure from our config logging level. And we'll be able to see this in action when we deploy our API towards the end of this section.